Welcome to Silicon Heartland Sessions, where we highlight the voices driving innovation across the Midwest and beyond. Today's episode features Srini Koushik, President AI and Sustainability at Rackspace Technology. With nearly 4 decades in tech, Srini shares how curiosity, not credentials, has been his greatest asset, leading him from hands-on coding at IBM to global leadership roles. If you've ever wondered how to stay passionate and relevant in an industry that changes every day, this conversation will leave you inspired and maybe even motivated to pick up a new skill like Srini did at age 50. But first, a big thank you to our sponsors, Rackspace Technology, your trusted multi-cloud solutions partner, Varonis, protecting enterprise data where it lives, on-prem and in the cloud. Trace3, helping organizations innovate through advanced IT strategy and execution, and Sigma Computing, enabling business users to explore live data without code. Let's get into it. So, Srini, thank you so much for joining me today, Silicon Heartland Sessions. This is an opportunity for us to highlight the great leaders in the Silicon Heartland. We've got a very, very special community, and it's because of leaders like you. You are the president, AI and sustainability and CTO at Rackspace.
Yep, that's correct. It's kind of the and it's the way I describe myself. Sean, is I'm the strong safety, right? For Rackspace. So, what position do I play? Strong safety, right? So make sure nothing slips
I love
through.
It. There you go. I love your humility too, man. Many people would aspire to being like the quarterback, but something to be said for those that really do the heavy lifting. And, I'm going to get myself in trouble with all of the football fans out there. So I won't say too much. So thanks so much for joining today. Let's jump right in. Yeah. My pleasure, man. So let's talk a bit about your personal and professional development. Starting with kind of like your keys to success. Let's just jump right in. So could you share some of the most valuable lessons or practices that have propelled your success? And you mentioned to me before the podcast, one of your favorite books is Jim Collins, his book Good to Great. Mm-hmm. I'm curious, how do the concepts from Good to Great sort of align to your own lessons that you've learned in your life experience?
Well, Sean, first of all, thank you for your kind words at the start. And I'm so glad that we've got a CTO, a really accomplished CTO like you, taking on the mantle of doing this podcast, because it's always pretty cool to talk to peers, right? And essentially, just have a conversation, right? And so I appreciate you doing the Silicon Heartland, because I tend to agree with you. I think we've got some phenomenal tech leaders here, and you've been highlighting them over your series. But I'm honored to be here, right? So let's jump into your question. I think, if I go back in my career, the one thing that has stayed common, Rick, and by the way, this is my 39th year I've been in the technology industry, 39 years. If there's one thing that has stayed constant all through the 39 years, has been I have loved technology. I just absolutely I'm an early adopter. I've got everything from the Apple Vision stuff to the Rabbit AI device and everything else sitting out here.
Wow.
So it's like something comes out, I'm just wasting money or going out and trying it out, because it's I think it's that basic curiosity that's kind of helped me all through. I've always loved doing that. That kind of propels my learning and others. And so I think that thread, I can say that I just turned 60. It hasn't changed from the day I was 22, 23 to now. It hasn't really changed. So that's been very helpful. However, one of the biggest lessons that I had to learn through my journey was when I left IBM and joined Nationwide in the early 2000s, right? In 2001, in fact. And I still remember Mike Keller was a CIO at that time at Nationwide. Mm-hmm. And he, when I came in, Mike and I had worked together at IBM, and he knew me as as an expert technologist, right? So when he came in, he said, Srini, I have no doubt that you're going to help Nationwide. The big lesson you're going to have to learn is how do you get uh, how do you get an army to follow you? Because whatever you've done at IBM, you may have led a small team, but think of those as the special forces, right? People who are actually they're trained
Right.
in like more experts like you. But here, you're actually coming in, and it's no slight against them, but the technology competence level is not the same as an expert, right? So how do you actually win the hearts and minds of people, and how do you build something that is sustainable? Is something that Mike taught me right up front, right? And I think that
Right.
switch back in the early 2000s is probably the biggest lesson and change that I've had to go through in my career, because it wasn't easy. I struggled for the first 2 years at Nationwide because, you're running at 100 miles an hour, and as an organization that whose primary business is not technology, an insurance company moves at a different pace. And
Very
so
true.
being able to understand uh, how do you adjust your pace so that you don't kind of slow down completely, but how do you bring the overall organization around has been a critical learning. And that's
That's
where the
incredible.
whole Jim Collins book comes in, right? In Good to Great, he talks about the flywheel concept, right? And the flywheel is essentially, if you kind of think about a flywheel that's a mile wide and a mile high and a ton, right? Like it takes you a long time to get it to go around one circle. But once you've been able to get that moving in the right direction, inertia takes
Momentum
over
takes
and you
over.
start
Yes.
making that piece. That flywheel concept is absolutely something that I'm sure the guys at Rackspace who work for me are probably smiling to themselves listening to this, because day two I show up like I got a CTO flywheel, right? And then
Right.
we're speeding up the AI startup. I've got an AI flywheel, right? So, but it's fundamentally, how do you kind of bring together a team towards a common goal, and how do you set it up so that it's systematic, right? Not a one
Hmm.
time thing to go through it. So that's been a huge lesson for me.
That's incredible. So, kind of going back to your transition from IBM to Nationwide, and you said this really, really interesting. This really resonated with me. In one respect, it's easier to lead a team of special forces because
Yeah.
they're seasoned professionals. They know what they're doing. They know the
Hmm.
mission. You don't have to explain it to them. It's different, and then changing to this concept where you have to inspire the masses to
Hmm.
follow you, is a big deal. And that flyweight concept really resonates with me as well. What
Yeah.
it says to me is, in any of these initiatives, and all the important things that we do in life, are born out of struggle, because what that
Hmm.
means is we're trying to do something really, really difficult.
Right.
And with this flyweight mechanism, or this process is, at least to me, the way I think of it is, start small, start to gain momentum, start moving the wheel a little
Hmm.
bit at a time, and over time, it'll gradually increase in speed.
Yeah.
So thinking about that, one of the other key words that you mentioned was struggle.
Hmm.
So reflecting back in your career, were there any missteps that you've encountered, and what have you learned from them? I know you're an avid reader, and I know you're an avid podcast listener as well. And one of the concepts that a lot of the thought leaders in technology and in business talk about, this concept of failing forward, and that certainly,
Hmm.
at least for me, resonates with this whole concept of a flyweight. So even when you make a mistake,
Hmm.
how do you recover from that, especially
Yeah.
when the stakes are so high?
Yeah. Um, yeah, as far as mistakes go, Sean, I've made more than my share of mistakes, right? So I absolutely do. Um, even if I just go back to the same time period I just told you about, just walking in from IBM into Nationwide, right? Nationwide is a phenomenal company. I just absolutely love the leaders there, the culture that's been built, and others. But I didn't appreciate it when I came in, right? I did not
Mm-hmm.
appreciate it when you came in, because you're coming in um, from an organization that's more technology centric than others. And this example I gave you about special forces versus army is very real because it's in an army you get people trained by different drill sergeants and others, and their techniques may not be exactly the same in others. Versus in special forces, you're trained to do something and do it very well. You can do it with your eyes closed. Right, so the leadership things that you expect. So you walk in a situation like this, and what I end up doing is, how do you not understand this stuff? This is just so, and the people aspect of it, I probably frayed a bunch of relationships in the first 6 months that I had to go and consciously rebuild. Because I was there for 11, 12 years. So it wasn't like, so you either had an option to, when you start seeing the organization push back on your style and how to drive that stuff, you have two paths, like either learn from it and then adapt to the organization, or leave, right? And not going to leave, right? Like that's not in my DNA. So I think it was really helpful. It is absolutely, I was lucky to have Mike Keller as my mentor at that point in time, because he would urge me to kind of keep pushing, right? He said, like, we need that, keep pushing. However, here's a better way to think about it. Here's a different way to do that piece. So I think part of that lesson learned for me from there was, how do you surround yourself with people that you can actually go and have these conversations, right? So meaning, once you get to a certain level, Sean, this, people are not going to tell you what they actually think, right? How do you kind of create your own personal board of directors that will kind of look at it and go like, dude, don't get too full of yourself, right?
Very true.
Or in other places, other times, like, don't be too hard on yourself, right? Because this has happened. Yeah. I've gone through it as well. So I think having that has been very helpful. Yeah. We do this naturally in technology, right? We've got our own set of subject matter experts, and if you have a problem with networking, as an example, you know who to call. Right, and you'll do that piece. We should be doing that. We should be doing that with team and leadership and other types of things as well, because you need that honest, candid board of directors, as a personal board of directors, that's going to help you kind of learn from your mistakes.
I agree with you. The thing that you said that really resonated with me was, adaptation, adapting. And the way I see it is, obviously, you're bringing your own style, you're bringing your own true, authentic self to this role. And there has to be a balance. I mean, you can't lose yourself. You can't change your leadership style and so forth. Like you said, there is that decision you have to make. Am I either going to adapt or am I going to leave? I'm not going to leave. I'm going to adapt. But adapt doesn't mean giving up yourself. It means finding the right balance. Yeah. And to your point, the thing that really resonates with me is the key ingredient, it sounds to me, for you is, mentors, talking with other folks, getting their input.
Yeah. I'll tell you, like, since we're Silicon Heartland, people will probably recognize the names, right? I have people like Mike Keller that I go to very often. He doesn't live in Columbus anymore, but I'm on the phone with him once every month. Still,
are you?
I am on. I have lunch with Dwight Smith, who you also probably know, right? Sophisticated system local. He's been here for 35 plus years. Amazing.
I know. Yeah, I know him very well.
And so having people like that around you, always you find something that is admirable in them. And I may never get to be a humanitarian like Dwight is, or a amazing people leader like Mike Keller was, but you can always keep trying, right? Continuous improvement. That's the whole. It's the whole. That's kind of what keeps you going, right? If you're stable and static, you're not going to learn.
Yeah, and then I would presume you're also a mentor for others as well.
Absolutely. I think that's the other one. Again, when people do ask me for it, I tend to build relationships with people who've been with me for a long period of time, right? Like, feel comfortable and then come to me. I do have what you would call mentoring relationship, which is where somebody's very specifically looking to build a particular skill, and then you meet with them to kind of help them think through it. But in terms of career mentors, like people that I mentor through their career. There's still 4 or 5 people that I spend time with, right, and make sure that it's there. I'm very proud of the fact that they're all very accomplished leaders in themselves, right, and they still feel like they want to pick up the phone and call me.
Heck yeah, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
So before we started recording, we were talking about your if you were to choose a theme song for your life, and you mentioned Louis Armstrong's "What a Wonderful World," and which, to be honest with you, it doesn't surprise me. I know how passionate you are about social causes and sustainability and responsible AI and things like that. As you mentioned, just as equally as you are, it feels to me, as passionate as you are about technology. And the fact that after all of these years, 37 years, I think, or 39 years,
yeah,
after all that time, you're still just as passionate about technology. But I get the sense you're also equally passionate about the environment, sustainability, social causes. I'm just curious, given that as a backdrop, can you share any personal accomplishments that you're particularly proud of and that are meaningful to you?
Wow. Really, one of the things that I've tried not to do is to kind of go spend more time on thinking about what did I accomplish, right? But I can tell you, like, the things that give me satisfaction is, I after my nationwide days, I moved to the Bay Area and then just came back in 2021 to Columbus, right?
Yep.
So I came to this country in 1987. So it's 38 years, and lived most of my time in the U.S. In Columbus, Ohio. Right, so this is a place that I've known and others. So,
right.
The accomplishments, so at the time in time. So let me take an example. Like, we built out what was the first agile application development center that was 100%. Agile, but also got CMM level 3 certified, right? And
wow,
what was cool about it was in 2008, right? That wasn't in 2023 or 2024. That was in 2008. 650, 700 people in the dev center within Nationwide. While at that point in time, that felt like a huge accomplishment. What really was a better accomplishment is I come back from the Bay Area now, and I'd be having dinner somewhere or meeting like at a Cloud Nirvana conference or something like that. And someone walks over and says, like, Srini, do you remember me? And I'm going, like, honestly, it's not that you're trying to be this. No, I don't. Right? And they say, like, look, you gave me my first start as a iteration manager on this line in the dev center, and that's actually the first time I got to learn this, and this is what's created my career. And then you turn around and say, okay, so what are you doing now? And they'll say, well, I'm running the entire thing for Huntington Bank, right? Except it has all thing for Huntington or for Cardinal Health, right, or one of those guys. And then you got like, wow, that impact. I'm very happy for them, and I'm very happy that like I had a small part to play in getting those things done. Because I think a big part of a lot of these things is you can give people the opportunity, you can kind of drive that, but the majority of the effort comes from the individual, right? They've got to kind of own it. So most of the times it's about like, thank you for mentioning me, but you got there because of what you did, right? And I think that sense of accomplishment that you get when somebody else has achieved something, right? And I think Scott Sanders, one of the guys who works for me, came back and said, like, Srini, do you realize that there are 24 people that worked in your teams over the last 20 years who are now CIOs in their own right?
That's
wow, like, yeah, that's amazing. But I'm sure it's there. It's what they did, right? And to me, the most fulfilling thing, Sean, is like, again, it comes, I guess, with age, is when just somebody comes in and just, they don't even have to thank me, but just say something like that, saying, "Hey, do you realize that I got to start there?"
And the influence that you had on them.
You made a difference in somebody's life.
Hell yeah. That's incredible. Speaking of making a difference, I know, you're obviously very passionate about the community and the people in your orbit and the influence that you have on them. I know you're very passionate about the environment as well. What social issues are you deeply passionate about and actively involved in?
Yeah. Another great question. Two two issues are personal to me, right? Number one, I think in the world that we live in, no child should go hungry, never, ever,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Like, that's human beings are, especially human children require a lot of nurturing before they are independent and on their own, right? We're
Right.
not like other mammals, like that maybe 6 months or 8 months and they're independent. This is
Right.
we're very dependent, and I think it's a crime that you have kids going hungry while, like, you got these ultra rich and ultra this thing who are buying out, like, $50 million, $250 million yachts and going around in that space. Again, I'm not advocating for any social thing. I'm just saying, um, in a world that you can actually have people be that successful, we've got to
Mm-hmm.
be able to find a way to kind of make sure that no child can go hungry. I want to be very clear that this is not class warfare or something. It's just, if
Right.
you're able to do all those
Well.
great things, you should be able to do this, right? And
Mm-hmm.
and and so that's something you do that. And then the second part of it comes down to, I've got two amazing daughters who are very successful in their own right. Like, my wife was a very successful professional, but I've had a chance to firsthand see the discrepancies, the disadvantages that women face in the work environment, right?
Right.
They're stereotyped into certain roles. Like, if they have to take maternity leave to come back in, they kind of take a few steps back in the career. They're expected to have a style that matches men, right? Which is, I just don't get it, right? When you're basically saying, you know, but you can see it right from the younger school days. Like, kids, boys are actually pretty boisterous. They're very vocal and other types of things. And it's like, in order for you to succeed in corporate America, you got to behave like a boy. And it's like, why? Right? That doesn't actually
I'm with
tie
you.
into that. So the second component of it for me has always been education and mentoring of women leaders. Right, that
Right.
is top priority for me. I think the more people that we can help in that space, you start creating an environment. And I know I kind of skipped past that question. You asked me about What a Wonderful World, right? Like, clearly, like, as an old guy, you had to pick an old song, but really, what resonates with me about that, what resonates with me about that song is the optimistic view of the world.
Thanks for tuning in to Silicon Heartland Sessions. If this episode sparked your curiosity, be sure to subscribe, share, and leave a review. And a final shout out to our sponsors, Rackspace Technology, Varonis, Trace3, and Sigma Computing, for their support of our growing tech community.